Section 5. To think of, okay, so whenever it says, like, your evil mastermind behind the murders, I personally think that it's Lady Macbeth, and I drew a brain because she's the brains of it, and I drew ice and a heart for cold-hearted. And yeah, so I have, 2 quotes to back this up. One quote is from Act 2, Scene 2, and it says, "My hands are of your color, but I shame to wear a heart so white." And this quote shows that Lady Macbeth was, like, the evil mastermind. She was a lot stronger than her husband when it came to mentality and, like, killing. And she says this to Macbeth, like, telling him that she'd be ashamed to be as weak as him, even though she has the same blood on her hands. Like, she's just as guilty. She's committed the same crime, stuff like that. And this shows that she feels no guilt and is a lot less hesitant than Macbeth is. And it shows that she's cold-hearted, and, I mean, granted, at the end, the guilt takes over, and, you know, she, like, is ill, and, you know, goes basically crazy, but during the actual killings and stuff like that, and everything that was going on, she was the opposite of weak, and often she got on to Macbeth about being weak, and she was like, oh my gosh, like, you know, let me do your job, stuff like that. So the other quote that I have for it is from Act 2, Scene 2, and it's, infirm of purpose, give me the daggers. The sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil if he do bleed. I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt. This quote is where Lady Macbeth calls Macbeth a coward for being afraid to go back to the crime scene, because he forgot to, like, plant the daggers or whatever. And so she takes the daggers to plant them with the guards so they look guilty for killing Duncan. And this shows her being the brains of the operation as well as the cold-hearted one. Her husband was too scared to go back, so if it weren't for her, they probably would have gotten caught a lot sooner. But yeah, I think that she's the evil mastermind behind all of it. Not to say that, you know, Macbeth is any less of, like, an evil mastermind or an awful person, but I definitely think that she definitely has, you know, more of a grip on herself, and uses her head a lot wiser. So, section 6, I put, for foil characters, I put that Banquo is a foil character to Macbeth, and I put ambition in comparison, which I will get into whenever I start explaining, then it'll make more sense. So for ambition, I drew a little, like, staircase, and it has blood, you know, going down, like, each step or whatever, and the crown, like, the throne is at the top. And then this is a cauldron for, like, the witches, and, you know, this says speak more, which is a quote that Macbeth says, which will be explained in a second. And then nonsense, it's not a direct quote, but it's basically what, Banquo was saying, because he wasn't, like, believing them at first. Okay, so I wrote, in Macbeth, Banquo is a foil character to Macbeth. One of the traits, to back this up would be ambition, like I said. Since Banquo was predicted to be, a father of many kings, and Macbeth is predicted to be a king, Macbeth shows his obsession with ambition, and, he's obsessed with ambition because he goes out of his way to murder all these people so he can be crowned first and, like, hold the throne, because he's greedy. Banquo, on the other hand, he's not as nearly obsessed with ambition as Macbeth is, and he finds the prediction to be, like, attractive, but that's all. Like, he doesn't act on it or anything like that. He's also not as easily tempted as Macbeth is, in the play. An example would be with the witches when Macbeth tells them, "Stay, you imperfect speakers, tell me more," which is why I put speak more, because it's basically, you know, the same. And then Banquo is not tempted to what the witches have to say, and he shows that by saying, "Speak not." This shows the contrast in traits between the two characters because, you know, they're very different, but in ways they are very like as well. And, you know, they bring those different character traits out of each other more so, like, you can see the comparison of similarities and differences. Sorry, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so Banquo later calls on the merciful powers, to help him retain, his nobility, and eventually he's affected by the witch's evil and, like, temptation, but the two aren't that far different, in this play, and they both display moral and immoral thoughts and behavior. And the comparison can be described by a quote from the witches that was in Act 1, Scene 3, and it's lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy, yet much happier. And in this quote, the witches were describing Banquo in comparison to Macbeth's character. So between the two, obviously, Banquo is a foil character to Macbeth. There's many foil characters in this play to Macbeth, but I decided to choose him. And even though they do have their differences and their characteristics, traits, and qualities, you know, kind of like bounce off of each other and help you depict, like, you know, characteristics out of one character while the other is like, you know, they just kind of help you bounce off and like pick out their different traits or whatever. But even though it does that, they're still very like, and you know, even after like Banquo's killed and stuff like that, he's still very much like around and mentioned. Okay, so now that we've done section 6, I'm so sorry this is like 20 minutes long. So, an explanation for my border. So I drew ivy leaves. They don't really look like that because I'm not an artist, but I tried. So I put ivy leaves, not leagues, so sorry. Because, again, it ties into, like, poison, and I was thinking about this whenever I was drawing it. It also can tie into, like, Shakespeare's, like, other stuff, like Romeo and Juliet. I mean, even though it's not, like, by ivy, it's still poison and stuff like that. But, you know, the poison being with, like, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth being, like, toxic, you know, poisonous things can kill you. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth kill people. And in Romeo and Juliet, you know, they die by poison or whatever. So I just think it, you know, ties into not only Macbeth, but, like, Shakespeare and his work and stuff like that. So yeah. And then my 4 quotes. This one, it's a quote from Lady Macbeth, and it's in Act 3, Scene 4. And it's very short. It's, "Are you a man?" And Lady Macbeth said this to Macbeth at the, banquet, because, you know, he was, like, picturing the ghost of, like, Banquo or whatever, and she was basically telling him, like, "Are you a man?" You know, like, stuff like that, like, basically calling him weak, and this quote specifically spoke to me, because, 1, I think it's funny, but 2, I really like Lady Macbeth, like, she's my favorite character, just because even though she's very cold-hearted and isn't that great of a person, some of the things that she says is very, like, feminist-like, which I'm, like, a raging feminist, so I just like her character overall. She's kind of, you know, like, not only with her being the brains and, like, the cold-hearted person of, like, you know, just the evil mastermind, but, like, the things that she says, too, it's like, wow, like, you're a woman, and you're strong, and, you know, you're doing it great, but whatever. So, yeah, that's basically how that one spoke to me, and I drew a little question mark. That's, like, the best way that I could think to illustrate that, because she's like, "Are you a man?" Like, basically, like, you know, calling him weak, like, you know, stuff like that. Another one is from Lady Macbeth, and it's from, Act 1, Scene 7, and it's, "I would have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out had I so sworn." And another thing, she's basically just saying, you know, like, again, being like, you're weak type of thing, and it just goes to show that she's cold-hearted and heartless. And then I drew a little brain and a hammer coming down on it to, you know, like, smash the brains out. Ugh, that's gross, but yeah, you get the gist. She's very cold-hearted, and again, it just spoke to me just because I really like her character. I promise not all of these are quotes from her. I just really like her character. This is the last one by her, I swear. My 3rd quote is, again, it's short. It's "Unsex me here," and it's from Act 1, Scene 5. And I put, like, no empathy because, you know, she's cold-hearted, whatever. And she was telling evil spirits to make her into someone who lacks, human conscience, and, it shows her ambition and determination. She was basically saying, like, make me less of a woman and more of, like, a man, which, okay, that's kind of contradicting to my whole feminist statement, because it's kind of like a backhanded compliment of women saying, like, you know, make me into something that's strong, like, lacking, you know, like, unemotional, stuff like that. So that is a little contradicting, but I still liked how she said it, so that one spoke to me. My last one. Sorry, this is so long. This one was just funny to me. There's really no other reason why it spoke to me. It was just funny. It's from Act 4, Scene 2, and it was a quote that the murderer said to Macduff's son, and it said, "What, you egg? Young fry of treachery." At first, whenever I first read it, and before I, like, analyzed it, I just thought that it was funny that he said that as, like, you know, a kind of like a comeback to his, you know, because his son was, like, trying to defend his dad or whatever, but I was like, wow, like, that's your comeback, but, you know, whatever. I just thought that was funny. I drew a little egg and a fish because fry means baby fish, or fry means someone young, and it also means, like, baby fish or whatever, and then the egg, because it means, like, you're yet to hatch, like, you're a boy, like, you're not a man. So that's what the murderer was basically saying, like, what you, like, boy, you know, like, you haven't hatched, you're not a man. Young fish, or, like, someone young, basically, like, baby, you know, and stuff like that. So I just thought that it was really funny, and those are my 4 quotes, and yeah, that is my, one-pager. So yeah, I do have, my list of quotes is in my written discussion, so it's not, like, just one page with the quotes. It's, like, the quotes, and I have them sectioned, you know, like, section 5, da-da-da-da, and, like, labeled and stuff like that. But my quotes are with that, with, like, brief discussions. I mean, obviously, I chose the video to discuss it as well, but you get the gist. And the link for, a link for the section 4 with the worldly connection. But yeah, that's it. Sorry, this is so long, 25 minutes, I apologize, but that's all.